Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Successfully Unsuccessful podcast, the leadership and self-help podcast for professional and entrepreneurial men that want to reach their fullest potential as husbands, fathers, and business leaders. I'm your host, Josh Dittrich, and today I'm very excited to share with you my story, my super raw version of the successfully unsuccessful story. It's really the inspiration for this podcast and really what some might call a career change, but I call a refinement of my purpose and a launch of the next phase of life. And it's really an old story. It's a 39-year-old, 121 day and some odd hours story. It's my life. And like maybe many of you growing up, life was believed to be something where you grow up to go work hard at school, get good grades, go to college to get a good job. And if you got a good job, you can make lots of money. And if you worked hard and made lots of money, you could save for retirement. And hopefully by the time you got to retirement, you didn't run out of your money. So that was my perspective. And to be honest, I didn't agree with it. I didn't subscribe to that. That sounded like too much work and way too much time to be spending doing things that I had to be doing. And so the first part of it was true. I did make a bunch of money, but most of it was not my path. I'm a strong-willed, stubborn firstborn who really didn't like school and certainly didn't want to work till retirement age, but I wanted to do it differently. And I wanted to do it my way, or differently than waiting till 62 and a half years old to enjoy it, if not longer. So at the age of 37, which is just a couple years ago, my partner and I sold 2 of our businesses for roughly 8 figures. And while to the majority of the world, $10 million is a significant sum of money, most will never see that in their lifetime. And it would certainly be considered very successful. But it was really the path to getting there that was proved to be unsuccessful. Let me say that again. A $10 million exit of my business, while considered very successful, the path to getting there was not. It was unsuccessful. And I've always known God will never leave me. He'll never forsake me. That God is really absolutely there in the peaks and in the valleys of life. But it really wasn't until I was in the lowest of valleys that the unsuccess of my sin and selfishness really caught up to me. It was no longer acceptable to just know who God is or to keep going through the motions of faith, because what I was doing just wasn't working. To just believe that God exists, knowing that I was saved by grace, just wasn't good enough. It's not good enough. It's like, what good is an amazing apple tree to look at if it's got terrible diseases? And which, to be honest, it attracts diseases and it's needs to be cut down. It's like this. What good is an amazing apple tree in your yard that looks great, but every single apple you try is terrible and not edible? Eventually, it will attract pests and diseases and further deteriorating its health and will need to be cut down eventually. It was in the deepest valleys where I discovered God's endless love and working power that could break the chains of my sin, the sin that almost cost me my life, my wife, and my family. With a growing family of 5 kids, it could no longer be just about me in this world. I could no longer continue to be the person I was, really a fake and a fraud. But to do that, to make that kind of change, I knew I had to do something drastically different. I had to give up control. I had to surrender my life and really fully trust God to allow Him to change me, because I was the one trying to do it on my own strength and it just wasn't working. This is my successfully unsuccessful transformation story. It all starts when I was born in Iowa, a small town, northern Iowa, roughly 7,000 people. I had a class of 120. It was a small kind of rural community. People would travel within 30 miles to come to our big Kmart. That was the kind of the largest shopping thing around. I grew up in a healthy home, very rich in love. We had nothing fancy, but we always had what we needed. There was always food on the table and we always had clothes. 6 of us lived in a 2-bedroom house with maybe 1,000 square feet or less of floor. But I was the oldest of 4 kids, but I got the luxury of sleeping in the very much unfinished basement. There were very steep stairs getting down to the dungeon, we called it. In fact, I have a number of friends that stumbled on their way down. So you can hardly complain, though, if you didn't know otherwise. Like, I didn't care because I just needed separation from my 3 much younger siblings. They were 3, 7, and 10 years apart from me. And so I had to be in a different place. My bedroom in the basement was an 8 by 12 room, nothing fancy, no door. In fact, it had a big opening in the wall that seemed like maybe it was once before a serving area or a bar, but I didn't quite understand. But the best part about being downstairs, besides the privacy, was this basement had drop tile ceilings, and it was used as my secret stash storage area where I could keep my money from my brothers or whatever magazines I would want to hide. But it was also had a window that you could sneak in and out of, not the room, but the basement. And it was definitely the size that you could sneak a girl in. I tested that out a few times, but I will celebrate, though, that I have 2 living parents that are still married and celebrating their 40th anniversary very soon. My father, my dad, self-employed as a copier repairman. He was active in our lives. He was basically at every sporting event, played catch with us every night, and he was the go-to homework helper. He was smart, he was intelligent, he could figure out how things worked and really could fix anything that would break. I admired him a ton. But the thing I never understood was just why our money situation was what it was, and everything seemed to be about money, and whether we could buy something or not, or go somewhere or not, every decision seemed like it was a financial one. But regardless, the thing I never understood, though, about my dad was that everything seemed to be a money issue. It was like most things just involved a lack thereof, and that was the answer. We couldn't afford it. But regardless, we always appreciated the time we got to spend together, because I had plenty of friends whose dads weren't around like mine and they had money. On the flip side, though, I had a grandfather that also had his own business in the trucking industry. He seemed to be always busy and always doing very well. I scratched my head about the dichotomy of the two and in their relationship to both time and money. One had time and the other one had money. And inverse of that would be one that didn't have the time had the money. And so I didn't understand why that was the way it was, but it didn't really give me any warm and fuzzies about wanting to be an entrepreneur. And it was really not that sexy or interesting to me at the time. So I didn't grow up with that as a goal. But my mom now, on the other hand, she worked very hard. She was full-time, but she was strict, and we always seemed to butt heads. We just didn't really click, and I never understood that. It was not that as if I didn't. We didn't have good communication between each other. But her way of showing love was serving us and making sure we did have everything we need: food, clothes, transportation. And she really made sure that we practiced good manners and always was looking towards God. And I respect that, and I love that about her. She always just seemed to take on the needs of others as well outside of her family. It was either taking care of 5 or 6 stray cats, or bringing food to those in the neighborhood or church that were sick or injured. And she just loved to serve. It was an amazing quality. I knew she loved me. I knew she loved us. I just never really developed a very strong relationship with her. But the great news is it's really never too late. And it wasn't too late for me. I was able to, many years later, just this year, start counseling with her. But it wasn't until a cancer scare happened last year. And I didn't want to regret not being able to strengthen my relationship with her. And it really caught me as an emotional thing. I didn't want to see that happen and have regrets. So this year we began to see a counselor together, and it's never too late. At the age of 39 and her at 68, it's been amazing, really, to see our relationship grow and get on the mend. It's been very rewarding. But despite our differences, I will say that my mom was the spiritual leader in the house, and I'm very grateful now looking back at that. But I was born to parents that were both raised Catholic. So that's how I was raised. But I was baptized and also received my second communion in the Catholic Church. And really, my parents had us attend a different church at the age of 4th grade. It was there where I got involved in King's Kids. And some of you might remember, but very similar to Awana's, where you would play games and learn scripture, and you'd have a chance to recite them back and earn points. I could tell that faith was important, and so they put us in this program, and it helped us. It gave us an amazing, strong foundation of scripture and memorization. Even though we did switch churches, I continued to go to the Catholic school because my grandparents were able to help support it. It was a significant cost, and my parents really couldn't afford that. we all agreed, mainly my grandparents and my parents, that it was a good investment to continue with. And even though sometimes it appeared like it was do as I say, not as I do, it seemed that people at our new church, though, had a kind of a different kind of faith, like a level based on having a relationship, not a religion, and not going through the rituals, and to live out your faith by loving God and loving others, and really simple, following Jesus. How hard is that? And it just seemed to be so appealing as opposed to going through the processes of the Catholic Church. And the entire extended family, frankly, was Catholic. And so it was like we were viewed as outcasts. And although it was more open to loving others than I believe I'd ever heard in a Catholic message. So it was very interesting that we were viewed that way. Maybe we weren't, but it really felt that way in that age. And I just know my mom and parents both did catch some flack. So it was one of those things that we dealt with. But the irony in all of that is that there's just a significant difference in the way they live, despite my opinions of their strictness. But looking back, I'm grateful for their example in my life and the values they instilled and has taken us through that journey. But I've always been that kid that's been strong-willed and wanted to do what I want to do. And I have a son that's the same way. So I guess I got what was owed to me or what was coming. But some things my parents required of us were okay with me, and I complied. But it was often because there were consequences if I did not. And many things I just ignored. I was a good kid. I followed most rules until it was the tough ones that I was able to get around with, and more like in the teenage years. But I didn't understand why the reason was no, and I needed to. I'm a why guy and understand what was the concern. Is it safety? Is it because of, and usually it meant something like I would say to my son that didn't matter because I know better. That's the entire thing. The relationship equity that we had was simply just not the same as this culture and this generation. And so I just didn't accept the answer unless I really understood the why. But as a stubborn child, I learned the hard way, doing it my way, oftentimes getting in trouble or breaking the rules. But I wasn't a troublemaker. I wanted to do it my way. I was stubborn and I had a temper. I wasn't allowed to watch Ninja Turtles or Power Rangers. We still laugh about that. Specific movies, including definitely those that were PG-13, were very rare until later on, but definitely no rated R's in our house until much, much later. I don't think that's that crazy, but on the flip side, I look at some of the movies now and there could be equally as worse. And here I am talking out of both sides of my mouth. But I wasn't able to listen to secular music. Most of our music was only Christian music, and we really weren't allowed to eat sugar cereal for two reasons. One, it was obviously sugary, but the second was it didn't qualify for the WIC program. So we were able to get it as free or reduced or discounted like it would qualify for, let's just say, Rice Krispies or Wheaties or something like that. Things like Taekwondo I wanted to be in. I had a good friend that was in Taekwondo, but my parents couldn't afford it. I was interested in gymnastics and there just wasn't anywhere to go. So that wasn't an option either. But fifth grade, I really wanted to play the drums. And part of the requirement was you needed to have piano experience. I did not, but I was able to convince my parents later on that I was going to be responsible enough and I was going to go play piano and practice, and convince them to pay for it. While that experience was good, it didn't actually teach me drums, and it really didn't matter when it came to playing the drums or learning the drums. It didn't even guarantee that I would ever play the drums. So it seemed really the only way to get in and play the drums was to make things happen. And so that was a theme I got used to. Like, how do I solve the problem? I was able to work out a deal to show up to school early and get a private lesson with myself, AKA pull out the drumsticks and just try to fail and see how that would work. I really loved it. I excelled at it, but no one actually knew how to play. So they were comparing me to nothing, which was fine because I looked like a rock star at a young age, even though I might have been just really learning. It worked itself out. I was able to continue on in band and play in the specialty bands like jazz and pep. As I got into 7th and 8th grade, I was invited to play at our church. Into freshman year in high school, I joined a local band. We called it Everything Red, and we even made t-shirts. It was pretty sweet. I felt like I was the man being able to hang out with these upperclassmen. The guys in the band were all juniors, and they had the vehicles and the freedom and basically to do whatever. It was really just the beginning, though. That type of freedom opened the door to me and realized there's this big world out there. And unfortunately, some of that freedom enabled me to get involved in drinking and smoking and chewing, really at a too young of age, hanging out with high schoolers. and funding my fun activity required money. I didn't have a ton of, and nor did my parents. So I was convinced I needed to get a job. So as early as I could at 14, I would get a real job with a W-2. Prior to that, I'd certainly mowed lawns and shoveled snow. I delivered newspapers. I had always been working. That wasn't unfamiliar territory. It was just the first time that I was able to show up on a regular schedule and get regular work, and hours that I was able to literally punch a clock with and then get my check. Big checks, let me tell you, I was making a whopping $5.15 an hour. Literally, it was punching the clock in and out when I came in. But for me, that was money. That was enough money that I was able to save. And eventually I bought a moped, and that became my new wheels. And that was my transportation, man. And I heard of an opportunity for a raise. And now that I had my wheels, I was able to drive instead right down the street. I was able to go a little farther out to the local Godfathers. And because I was able to get there, the responsibilities continued to grow. And while I was there, it led me to really the next phase of working at the big Kmart. So it was just one thing after the other, but those weren't the areas. I just felt like I grew up at such a fast, young way. And these two girls moved to the neighborhood when I was, I don't know, in my middle school years. Two sisters, one was younger than me, one was older than me. And the younger one was a tomboy and hanged out with all of us and all the boys in the neighborhood. And she was cool. And the other was her sister that was 1 year older than me. She was the cute one that I liked. And I'm not sure exactly how things progressed so quickly, but all of it was pretty kept under the radar because I was not allowed to have a girlfriend or date. But she was into me, and soon we were doing things 14 and 15-year-olds should not be doing. And it was like almost because the strictness and the rules I had, I just wanted to rebel, or was at whatever, running on the down low, and one thing led to another. And I ended up breaking the rules, sneaking out of the house, and it was a common occurrence, and too common that we even went too far. I don't know if I would call it sex, but that's technically what it would be. At this silly young age, like, what was I doing? We were convinced we were in love, like endless talks at nighttime, falling asleep while on the phone. It just clearly that secretive life led to increased relational intimacy, which eventually led to messing around, as I mentioned. And it's really not how my parents taught me to act. And I just, at an early age, began living and figuring out how to do things that I wanted to do. And again, back to this relationship equity, I just couldn't share these things with them without getting in trouble. So it was always secretive. I didn't let them speak the truth into my life because I was always a lecturer. And so I did what I wanted. In school, I was an average student. I always excelled at math, and my passions were in music and video, like video editing, broadcasting, working and hanging out with my buddies and girls. And I played pretty much all sports until 8th grade when I threw in the towel. My interest in earning money grew then and far outweighed sitting on the bench with friends. So I just continued to work 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, all the way up till I left the house. But I learned how to juggle all of these things: school, working 2 jobs, a church, going to church and playing drums at the church, my band, friends, girlfriends. And this was the season I really enjoyed. And I had far more freedom than I should have. My parents trusted me as a good kid, and I'd certainly abused that trust, but I never really got in trouble doing the things I was doing. But despite growing up in the church and having a best friend whose dad was the pastor, I learned so much and instilled a really strong faith in me that I think I wouldn't have had otherwise. Like I said, the scripture memorization is still to this day. I remember some scriptures that I was taught at a really young age, but I just wasn't really choosing to live it out. Like most teens, I really just wanted to continue to do my thing. I was very concerned about my hair, and see how far that got me. But despite the depth of my faith, that faith really just was head knowledge. It wasn't strapped to my heart. It wasn't living it and breathing it. It hadn't seeped down deep enough into my heart and affected how I lived. And it was very obvious based on how was I living. The question is, where was the fruit? So I remember the end of my sophomore year, before going into my junior year of high school, I wanted to make a change, and I was really ready. I knew my rock band buddies were going to be moving to college, and I was going to have to start fresh with some new friends. I had written off the guys in my grade because the last couple of years I've been hanging out with the older kids in the band. And there really just wasn't a group left that I wanted to hang out with. So I doubled down on working, and this time at the Big K, earning $7 an hour, doing 20, 25 hours a week of work. But at the end of that summer, I decided to switch schools. I went from the private Catholic school and moved to the public school my junior year. I really had nothing to lose because I knew and whom and what I was leaving, and whom potentially was all upside from there. Everything I had to gain, it seemed. But what a great decision. It was like, it proved to be the top couple best years of my life. I made so many good friends, even some best friends, just kids that accepted me for me. They thought I was funny. They let me hang with their crew as if I'd spent the last 10 years growing up with them. And really, furthermore, the public school had amazing post-secondary program where I was able to learn and dive into video broadcasting. We had all the cameras and the editing bays and the news studio, and this was my intro to broadcasting and really helped me discover that passion and know-how that I was able to harness with that technical side. So I love those 2 years and really look forward to going to school, as crazy as that sounds, mostly for the social aspect, of course. But I even felt myself going back out for baseball my junior year. But the most famous words I heard that year were, "Dittrich, go get the bucket." That was my job. I was the ball errand boy. So I played a few games, usually never started, but it was really about the camaraderie. I was excited to be back in and trying it out. My senior year, I was working for Kmart as well as the radio station. And my most memorable moment was when I fell asleep at the station and woke up to literally ring. And it was my mom on the other line reminding me that I had a job to do because there was dead air or silence on the screen. Whoops. Sorry about that. But aside from that, I really feel like I had a knack for audio and video. I'd planned to go to school for broadcasting in Minneapolis here at a Christian college that my best friend from my old band was already going to. But after visiting him a few times, something about it just felt way too stuffy. Living on campus in tiny dorms, it was like no partying, right? Eating cafeteria food and going to chapel every day, that didn't seem like it was my jam. Couldn't bring a car. How was I going to get around? And we had curfews. We would have had curfews. And so for 18 years old, that was too much restriction. Plus, too much time, 4 years, and that's a lot of debt at the end of it. It didn't sound that good. Now, there was an alternative, and it wasn't until a college fair happened at my high school that I actually decided to go to that school that I was already accepted to not go to it, actually. I was accepted to this other school, this Christian school, but I was introduced to this technical school from this guy with slick back hair at the job fair. He got me hook, line, and sinker with the good perks I was looking for, though. It was less expensive. It was really an alternative, right, as a trade school. So I was able to do a 2-year degree and a 15-month program, and I was able to finish it in 12 months. There was an apartment, and so we didn't have to live off campus. I was able to bring my vehicle so I could have friends over and get to and from work. It was awesome. It was like exactly what I wanted, and I was able to be done really quickly. So being a kid who wanted to move fast and do things, what time would I have to lose? But I was okay with giving up my summer because it really was like 30 days after I graduated high school where I moved up. It just boom, boom. It started so fast. We signed the docs and I was off. It seemed like I had $1,200. I moved to Minnesota, and that money was basically all I could scrap together from what I had previously saved and some of the graduation card money that I got. And my expenses were simple, but they were running out quick, like a car payment, rent, and living costs. It was like 3 months of runway. Like I had to get a job. So because of my interest in audio and video, I chose to apply at Best Buy. I got hired and started as a cashier in the first month, making a whopping $8.50 an hour. I was promoted to sales, home theater, actually, AV again. And after I started as a cashier and I was selling the replacement plans, I was killing it. They wanted to have me back selling bigger ticket items, and it was fun. I had a ton of fun. It was a blast selling that stuff in the back theater there. But 1 year later, it was just 12 months after I moved up here, I was promoted to the supervisor or the senior of the Department of Home Theater and making $35,000 plus benefits. I did have to work nights and weekends, but it definitely appeared to be much better than starting out at $9 or $10 an hour at the time, running a video camera in some rural town. And those were the prospects that I would have going into the broadcasting degree. So I very quickly avoided that whole thing and flushed that degree down the toilet. But I guess here we are now. We'll see. I spent 2 years actually in the store learning how sales worked and building relationships, build a rapport, and how to coach and how to lead. But there was a guy that came in the store one day, and I heard about this opportunity while he was at Best Buy Corporate making six figures. And he came in sharing with me that he was selling to businesses and corporate accounts. Basically everything that you could find in the store, he was selling to these businesses, and who sounded like he was enjoying it, making great money, and he had nights and weekends off. And so it sounded like a no-brainer for me to figure out how to do that. I had to figure it out. I really love the stores as much as they taught me how to sell, but I just knew someday I wanted to have a family, and it was going to be pretty tough to learn to make that work on weekends and nights, especially every holiday. But while I was in the stores though, I met two guys there. They went to college together. They happened to know this other guy they went to college with, plus this other dude named Ray, whose wife was an OBGYN and made good money. He was 7 years older than us. So the four of us, five of us, put together this band called Drift Effect, and boom, it was born. We became rock stars. No, but it was a ton of fun there. It was just a blast. But getting off track here, a few months later, my manager in home theater, he moved to the same corporate area department that I found out about from that guy that I was visiting. And I was like, what? I didn't know that you were leaving. Oh my gosh, you're going there? Help me out. I got to get in there. So he called me up and said, dude, I got a role for you. It was going to be entry-level customer service. And even that was going to give me a pay raise. And I was like, what? I was going to work no nights, no weekends, and pretty much have a career path to get into B2B sales at corporate. But I quickly went through those various roles and jumping through the hoops and doing what I needed to, and got a spot on the outbound sales team. And this is where I learned the old smile and dial, cold calling, 40 to 80 dials a day. I learned account management, and I learned how to form strategic relationships with customers. But I grew my book of business probably over the course of a few years to $4 million a year in revenue. And that put me in the six-figure club by the age of 23. But meanwhile, it was the band that was growing. That's what I really believed was going to be my thing, my goal, the real driving force behind this. And I was loving life. It was like going out with your buddies, having some beers, playing all over, and then get back up on Monday and selling and making good money, and then rinse, repeat. It was living the kind of the Rockstar life. But I'll say this, even that has its end. And like after various dead-end relationships, the traveling Rockstar life, 200 different shows across the Midwest and drinking and whatever, we were a legit professional band, but it was hard. Like we were always broke, and all the money was really poured in by our leader of the band and his wife, and they funded most of the efforts. Some of the shows paid for to break even, but we had no profit. Every year we took a negative tax return, which allowed us, it helped me more than it helped anyone, because it takes cash to lose cash, and I didn't put any cash in, but I got the benefit of the loss. And so it was very lopsided, but that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to see this thing go, and I was along for the ride. I was a drummer. I was pumped. We were going to go big. And so it was in that season, as much fun as I was having, it just seemed like there was little grounding. I wasn't going to church. I just was doing my thing. But through mutual friends, I met my wife at a barbecue, and she was in a similar season of life. We had very strong faith. She did as well. She grew up with that. And so it was like we fell in love because of how obsessed I was with her. I really lost interest in the band. I ended up getting fired from the band. And the only thing I was ever fired from in life to this day was my job as a musician. And that happened twice. I was in another band in high school. So I don't understand, but maybe that's a sign. Then again, I've been playing drums in a worship band in our church there. But that was the kick in the butt I needed. And boom, like that, we met, we got engaged, we bought a home, we got married, and we had our first kid all in less than 3 years, under the age of 25. It was a new life with a new life and a new season, and things started off really good on the home front. We added a dog to the mix, and then a cat, and then another cat. We found a church home, and we plugged back into serving and learning a little bit about marriage and along the ways of its ups and downs, and we grew in our faith. Meanwhile, my wife was teaching and driving into Minneapolis while pregnant with our first kid. She also decided to go back to school for her master's. She was a machine. I didn't understand. And here I was just busy working. I would come home and I would have the night to myself or spend some time just chilling out. And it was great. But while working at Best Buy, corporate, I became fascinated by small business. I worked with so many different customers, small business and different size businesses that were growing. And I wanted that. I wanted to make a difference in a small company versus being this little tiny cog in a large company with 50,000 employees. But it was that season that I began to dabble in the entrepreneurial activities, reselling tungsten rings on consignment through wedding stores and on eBay and on Amazon. I imported some jerseys, imported some workout DVDs. Oh, in fact, the jerseys, I had a ton of fun selling them to the tailgaters down at the Viking Stadium. But I found a passion to build, really, and an itch to scratch. It was trying to do whatever I could to earn a buck and do it the unconventional way. While I was at Best Buy, at this point, my own entrepreneurs failed, but through a common ground in music and faith, actually, one of my best customers lived within 100 miles, still in Minnesota, which was most customers I were dealing with were nationwide. So we decided to meet up, and a side hustle partnership was born, a business opportunity that really was a chance of a lifetime. So this guy, 7 years my senior, who I grew to love like a brother, became a great mentor. Jamie Narvig took a bet on me. He made an opportunity for me that was really something I could do on the side and allowed us to build a relationship together. I was 100% commission, but it was okay because I was able to leverage existing relationships and sell different products to some of the same customers. And so there was a lot of synergy, and it was worth a shot. We grew from 3.6 million to 5.4 million in that half-time, part-time side hustle role. And it was then, after about 18 months, Jamie made me a sweet offer that I couldn't refuse. And it was timing was everything in that case. Like, my book of business was shrinking at Best Buy. The recession of the housing situation was happening, and the filter business online was growing because filters really weren't online. And so the timing couldn't be better. And I was in. Danielle was in, and we decided it was a good thing because we trusted him and we already had an established history. But despite the 100-mile drive one way, we were very excited. I was given the opportunity to be a part of something big and to help build something great. It was a ton of fun. I learned to be a part of this entrepreneur's vision and learn. I learned all aspects of small business and really the balance between team leadership and high-powered individual contributions. And I love to sell. I love to build and work on my own, but I also learned how to manage and lead. And it was a great experience. I got the mix of both remote work and office work before that was even a thing. And I really learned this thing called scrappiness, stewardship, purpose, appreciation, and reward. I had a great comp plan. One time I had a comp plan that was like the upside to 300,000. It was like, you can quadruple the sales and make 300,000. I'm like, whoa, I've never seen that before. Yeah, that was like insane growth. I think we ended up 10 million short, and I still did very well, but I did make the 300K, let's say. But it was an opportunity nonetheless to see unlimited upside, which I'd never seen before. And I was able to learn and grow things both organically and through acquisition. That was brand new. What the heck? You could buy a business, see its cash flow and benefit from it, and using other people's money. So I was not an MBA at this point. I got my MBA, it felt, because I was able to understand finance, EBITDA, and amortization and depreciation, understanding the tax side, but the more softer skills like hiring and navigating legal challenges or building a sustainable culture. I learned about growth hacks and how to create partnerships that will win and create scale in supply chain and in marketing and building brands. And I was being paid to learn and grow. I didn't have to go to the university. And basically, because someone bet on me, I was able to do this and have this opportunity based on very little of what I had done in the past. It was all about what I had done more recently and what I promised I could do. And this is what I wanted. This is the autonomy I was looking for. I guess I still had to show up, but I wanted that opportunity, and I wasn't getting that at Best Buy. And so it was really my jam. But everything involving someone else's business, being on the payroll, you had to show up. But it came with its perks. Like, I was able to travel, network, and meet some of the people I never would have met. I got to see Gary Vee for the first time live many years ago, 2011 or 12. I was just doing things I was never privileged to do growing up, pursuing amazing opportunities most people won't ever get to experience in their lifetime. But it seemed to me that the reason for my existence changed at that point. Like, my purpose for getting up in the morning was to build a great business. It was more than just providing for my family. It was to grow the company, to grow wealth and success. It was the pursuit of success, though, that became my priority. Winning became an obsession, man. It was like the mindset began a negative attitude, and it just settled in and impacted my home and my marriage. And as a father, like a person who believed in God, this should be one of those areas I should be aware of, right? But a mentor shared with me once that we deceive ourselves by the smallest of compromises. And this is exactly what happened. A series of little compromises, if not kept in check, eventually get us to a point where we're so far down the wrong path, and we're unable to really truly distinguish right and wrong. And deceit is from the enemy. It's done in a very sneaky way. It's a slow fade. There's a song by Casting Crowns called Slow Fade. It talks to this, but that just means these little tiny decisions that are the wrong ones that bring us down this path, and our hearts continue to deceive ourselves that everything's okay, but meanwhile we're a long way from where we need to be. To combat that, though, I needed accountability in my life, and no one was really pushing me for that. And here I was, this stallion, and wanted to do me, and it just wasn't working. I was working very long hours. I enjoyed regular happy hours with the team, and there were various vendor partners we were entertaining. So the frequency of travel for work became mini vacations and unhealthy eating and drinking and strip clubs. And I was selfish. I was impatient. I was angry at home. And the slow fade hit my marriage. I was so disconnected from the home life and obsessed about the next project or opportunity to build and scale this business. It was all I talked about. But I convinced myself that it was my duty to give it my all. I made this great, fantastic business a priority over taking care of my mind, my body, my spirit, especially my wife and my family. I felt like my little children were an inconvenience to me and keeping me from doing the things that I needed to do. And being a dad felt like just a massive inconvenience, like having to change dirty diapers, giving bath times, like taking care of babies, giving them the bottles, and wrestling with colicky kids at nighttime to get them back to bed, and all the other issues that came with that. But simply put, I had poor priorities, and I really lacked a servant attitude. I was very selfish. These are heart issues. The selfish heart issues grew, and they grew out of control. I wasn't even really aware of it. But physically it showed. I gained a ton of weight. I'm a short guy. I'm 5'6", and at my peak, I was 203 pounds, like 40 pounds more than I am now. And resentment in my heart began to grow, and it grew against the owner, Jamie. Unfortunately, he had what I wanted, but he was my friend who gave me this opportunity. He blessed me, but I was just so ungrateful. That resentment grew and grew because I knew I was the hardest working guy in the company, making things happen, but it always seemed to feel that what he was paying me wasn't enough for the sacrifices I was making. But still, he continued to bless me with large raises and eventually the option to be awarded some stock options. And he even gave me a $50K raise one time that would allow my wife, Danielle, to stop working and be able to stay home and be a full-time mom after our second kid came. But he thought it would take some pressure off. And he was right to some degree. It was nice to have my wife home. But I could see the anger. He could see it building, and the pressure building is my outbursts and frustrations, and even these inappropriate confrontations and leadership meetings were happening at work. But I desperately wanted to be rewarded for the work that I was doing. In many cases, I demanded it. But the heart of the issue was what I really wanted was to be him. And I wanted to pay myself whatever I decided and not be told when and where and how to work. I thought I earned it. And that was certainly something that I had to learn. Looking back, there was opportunities for me to mend the relationship with him more recently. And I'm very glad, because I was holding that stuff against him. And even though he personally hadn't done anything to me, I projected all the things towards him. And so the simple truth was this: I had blind spots. Like, I thought my abilities were really greater than they were. And the board agreed. Who was I? This is my first real venture, and I didn't have the experience that some of the executives that had been hired in the past had. And I was a new guy to this space. I had not done big things, and the things we were doing before were new. So part of this was like, it doesn't matter. What we're doing is so unique. I'm scrappy. I know this business. And that's where sort of it bothered me. But we were working on the vehicle while going down the road. Like, it was crazy. I felt that each new marketing guy that they brought in was viewed as the savior of the world, even though they had significantly more experience than I tended to be the expert in the company that was the one training them and getting them up to speed. And most of them didn't work out within 6 to 12 months. And I had this "I told you so" attitude. I just couldn't keep my frustrations with the board and CEO in check. It's like I became jaded and frustrated in the office and was just an angry person at home. There was this significant disconnect between the guy I was at home and work, and the guy I was in public in other places with others, and the person that I thought I was. My wife saw it firsthand, and she had the worst of it. It was not the man she married, certainly. And even after 4 or 5 or 6 beers, who knows? When I was a porker, she might have even seen like a 5th or 6th version of me. Who knows what would come out? And it's just the lifestyle I was leading. It wasn't a good one. But her disappointments and sadness, it really led to a resentment, and resentment from anger, the anger to confidence in herself that she no longer needed me, that she would be better off figuring out things alone with all the kids. She wanted to end things legally, as divorce was a common word thrown around our home. I thought she was crazy. It's just her, I told myself. But good change was coming. It had to come because it was not working. But I had to go lower before I could rise. And a couple big whoopsies had to happen first before I would really get it. A big time executive from a large publicly traded e-commerce company packed his bags and moved to Minnesota. When I realized that the board, the CEO realized that I was not the guy, I decided for the first time, I really just start going through the motions. And at that point, I'd seen it, I'd done it, and I was okay. I was okay with that. This guy came from a large company. He knew what he was doing. I knew I could learn from him. And it was unfamiliar territory, though, for me to take a step back and work less hours. And I saw this guy trying to figure out all the pieces of the puzzle, and we find ourselves back to the same struggles. And it was what it was, but we were looking for ways to grow, and the board demanded it. So I was doing my job, but not like before, and not as acting if I was the owner or someone that was really concerned for the overall business. But it was really a behavior that I never practiced. That was unfamiliar. It was a whole new era of cynicism. I started seeing significantly more engagement from the board on a day-to-day basis and various ad hoc meetings, which seemed like the 20th version of the same plans I've seen, but just said or worded differently by somebody else and in a slightly more polished and professional way. But they had the support of the CEO and the leadership team and the board. So it really became time for me to start considering that job of 7 years now to start looking at doing something on my own. So I started Plan B, to build something else I could stand on for myself. And that idea became like a virus in my brain. It didn't stop until the idea of launching my own business became clearer and clearer. It became just a matter of what I do and when I do. It's a matter of when I do it and what I do, not if I do it. My why was very clear. Like, I wanted freedom and autonomy to do these things my way. I didn't want anyone telling me I could or couldn't. I didn't have a comp plan. I didn't want a comp plan based on unrealistic same sales goals that came from crazy expectations and new areas of the business that hadn't even been proven out. Like, forecasting became about like scientifically as much as throwing a dart at the dartboard. And I know some of you can relate out there as some organizations do that, but it was hard. It wore on me. But the determination I had for this idea of freedom and controlling my own time and having autonomy became really my focus. And when it hit me that I should build my own Amazon brand or brand on the Amazon platform, I didn't stop. Like, from the brand name, logo, creation of essential values to the first product, that it was an overnight success. I knew I had something, and that little taste was all I needed to accelerate growth and double down. I needed to form and finalize my partnership with my current co-leadership team member, Ryan. He and I shared the same vision for building something and to achieve really similar goals. We had inverse advanced skills, but many overlapping skills that helped us accelerate things. He was data-driven, systems thinking type of guy, interested in the finance, tech, and operations side of the business. But I was the growth guy. I was the ideas guy. I had the energy and I had the ability to execute and make things happen. But I remembered something I heard from a great EOS implementer that we hired. It's this picture of teamwork. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to go together. And things were working so well between us. Like, we decided to buy a separate business from a guy Ryan knew who was retiring. Then we hired Ryan's sister to run both of them. And she too was tired of the 15-year corporate game. So it was perfect. And all of a sudden we had 2 businesses producing pretty good amounts of cash, and they were just side hustles. And so we let the cash build. But we had a building and we had the team. And so it was time to get going. What? how did this happen? Like, we were making it happen. And when this happens, you need to keep yourself in check. We made it happen. I made it happen. These are words you find yourself saying. And when you get to a sniff of this money you haven't seen before, it's easy to let your guard down and be influenced by things of this world and stuff. It simply creeps up, and it creeps right into your heart. And things and stuff like home improvement projects can easily straddle a line between a need and a want. Family vacations went from never doing them to very frequently. And you have to keep this stuff in check. And things are not bad in and of itself, vacations and home improvements, but it changed the perspective that I had to be more aware of and really take on a role of stewardship and understanding how I was spending my money. Because what I could afford now was quite different than my recent past, and especially the way I grew up. My frugal spending and conservative tightwad background that I once felt like was a strength and an area of humility was being challenged. The love of money turned confidence into pride, and I was now having to guard my heart in a new way. Like, I did not have this concern at all when I did not have money. Keeping greed and pride and contentment in check was new for me. This was simply another matter of the heart that I had to navigate. You pair that with anger I was dealing with and resentment towards the boss. This put me all far off the beaten path. So you may not have the anger or pride or selfishness struggle like I do. Your struggle may be called something else, but whatever its name is, it exists for all of us humans. And we're not just always looking for it, though, or we're not even consciously evaluating if it's there. But it may not have a name, but we need to name it. We need to call it out by its name so we can squash it. And at the end of us, we all have it. Absolutely 100% all of us have that. And how can you say that with such confidence, you might ask? Because we're humans. We all say things like, I'm only human, or no one is perfect, and everyone makes mistakes. The Bible says super simply, we all fall short of the glory of God. Sin is simply saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, or failing to do the wrong thing for God or for people. And your sin may not look like mine. It may just manifest itself differently, but it's sin. And for you, it could be called lust for women or pornography or sleeping around. Perhaps it's an addiction to gambling or bad drinking habit and even driving under the influence. But the use of profanity, who knows, simply the sharp tongue and lack of patience we have with our kids and our wives, that one still gets me in trouble. Like, how can you treat your child that way and then go out and be this other guy? And it's hard to reconcile. We need to keep that in check. And for me, I think it's an area men can relate to. But as simple as talking about a coworker, even like sometimes, or a neighbor behind their back is sin. And it's everywhere. It's impossible to avoid. And we need to reconcile that with God. And so that was for me, like that slow fade was happening. But because of how I grew up, the idea of being able to afford things became so appealing, though. A sports car. It was fun to walk into a sports car dealership when I was in Chicago for a trade show and look at a $100,000 Alfa Romeo car, and just knowing that I had enough money in the bank that I could buy it. That's a strange feeling. But it's weird. Even more weird is how being generous also has lots, and having lots of cash while being out at the bars and strip clubs while traveling can earn you cool status with friends, old and new. And wow, like how much of a lie can that be? Like, it's a facade. And so those things are examples of the way it was creeping in and manifesting itself in my life. And it made it extra fun finding any and all of the sponsored corporate events to hit up when traveling, like knowing there were no limits of what we couldn't do or get into, because no one was checking on me and there was no accountability. It was just fun. And we were on work travel, so why not?